everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about eventually I will go through all of them, but essentially this is part one of talking about all the books that I have ever given 5 out of 5 stars. So this video was actually suggested to me by a couple of you guys, and I thought it seemed like a really fun idea. So essentially I'm going to be just kind of going through my Goodreads and checking out which books I have given 5 out of 5 stars in the past. And it's going to be pretty interesting because I really don't give ratings anymore. And I do kind of have a rating like in my mind. So if you guys would like, I could do another video where I talk about books that like would be, just general 5 out of 5 star books. So essentially books that I've read recently, but I don't give ratings anymore. But if I did give them a rating, it would be 5 out of 5 stars. Does that make any sense? I don't really know, but I can do that sort of video for you guys if that's something that you would be interested in. But we're gonna be focusing on kind of just like books that I've read in the past that I gave 5 out of 5 stars. So I'm just going to go ahead and make my Goodreads show an order of like highest to lowest rating. So really no particular order with these. It's just going to be whatever order Goodreads shows me the books in. And I'm not sure if that will go by like date read or whatever. I'm not sure, but this should be a pretty interesting list to see if like my opinions are still the same about these books that I've given 5 out of 5 stars or if they've changed. We shall see. Also, it's really nice outside right now and it's a Saturday, so there's a lot of neighbors that are outside. So if you hear any noise, I don't think you will because it is pretty well insulated, but I know the neighbor like right there is doing some yard work and stuff. So if you can hear that, I'm sorry, but I'm still gonna film because if I'm waiting for like no one to be outside, it's just not gonna happen. Like the neighbors back there, they have kids and they're always outside because the weather's nice. So we're just gonna have to get used to that, but it's not going to be as bad as like last year when we were in the apartment and it was just so loud because even the neighbor upstairs, that was brutal. So basically I can get through anything now. Okay, so the first book that shows up that I've given 5 out of 5 stars is The Sea of Monsters, which is book number 2 in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series by Rick Riordan. And my review for it just says, these are great freaking books. Now, when I read these, I don't think my opinion, like I can't really say it's changed because it's been a really long time. I'm not really sure, but I feel like this would kind of be closer to a 4-star series for me now. I did really enjoy the series, but there's so much hype surrounding the Percy Jackson books. So I feel like I felt pressure to like really love them. And when I think back on it, while I did really enjoy them, I think I was a bit too old by the time that I read them to like fully appreciate them. And that's not me saying that you can't like read a middle grade book when you're older and still enjoy it. It's just my personal taste. It didn't entirely click with me. I had a good time reading them and I did like finish with the series, but I think if I had read them sooner or earlier in my life, then I probably would have like stuck with my 5 out of 5 star rating given the nostalgia surrounding it. But I read them when I was in university already, and while I enjoyed them a lot, I don't know if I would still say that it's a 5 out of 5 star read for me. While I think they are fantastic books, I think my personal enjoyment would probably be a little bit closer to a 4 out of 5 stars. This is just going to be all over the place because next we have a few classics. So we have 1984 by George Orwell first, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. And I do think that 1984 is really fascinating. I think it's a super interesting dystopian and definitely worth the read. And especially when you're like getting older and you're starting to think more about government and things like that, I think it's really, really interesting to read that book. And like with how technological life is now, I think it's interesting to look at the lens of that book and like apply it to today. I'm not saying that it's everything that's going on today. Like I'm not getting into that, but it is definitely a book that makes you think. So I do still think that is one of my favorite classics. That being said though, there is a portion where it's just like textbook that he's reading, and I definitely skipped that part because I think it was just like too much info dumping for sure. Next 5-star read is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And this one I'm definitely not really sure how I feel about it now. I think the idea of The Great Gatsby is something that I really enjoy, like the 1920s setting and everything about that. But I think I read this book, I read it in grade 12, and I knew at that point that I wanted to be an English major. So I was reading all these classics and reading them, and I was like, oh, I should love them. And The Great Gatsby, well, I think I did enjoy it. I think a lot of it kind of went over my head and I didn't really get it, but I just felt like I should enjoy it. So I'm not really sure if this one would still remain a 5 out of 5 star favorite for me. Next is As You Like It by William Shakespeare. And this is actually definitely still a 5 out of 5 star read for me. I read this before I went to actually go and see the play at the Globe in London, and it was such a fantastic experience. I really love Shakespeare's comedies, and this is definitely one that stood out to me as one that I really enjoyed. There's definitely been some that I really haven't enjoyed, like Two Gentlemen of Verona I didn't like at all. I wasn't the biggest fan of, was it Taming of the Shrew? I don't think it was Taming of the Shrew. Measure for Measure, that's the other one. But yeah, I definitely did really enjoy As You Like It though. Next is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. So obviously I really love The Book Thief, and this remains a 5 out of 5 star favorite for me. I just think this is such a marvelous work of fiction. It just absolutely blows me away. It's an absolutely incredible read and a book that will stick with me forever. It's one that I know, like, I don't know why people always apologize to me when they read that or they read Alice and they don't like it, because it's definitely not for everyone. Not everyone likes the style of writing in it. I think the style of writing is absolutely beautiful, lyrical, and I love the perspective as well, because the story is told from the perspective of death, and that's definitely something that's kind of polarizing, but for me, that was just like the cherry on top of the story. It's such an emotional book. It's heartbreaking. It just is like a wild ride overall. It will stick with you. It's definitely one of those books that like finds its way into your heart and then you will never forget it. And that's exactly what it has been for me. I've reread it a couple of times, and every time I just have loved it even more. And I think this obviously is definitely like a 5 out of 5 star read for me still, for sure. I'm going to kind of skip over the classics because I do actually have quite a few classics that I've given 5 out of 5 stars, but I feel like I could kind of do a separate video on classics and if I still love them. But next up is Looking for Alaska by John Green. I read John Green at what I feel like was the perfect time in my life when I discovered John Green. It was a point in my life where I was really into like the angst and these intelligent characters and everything, and I fell in love. And then it became kind of cliche to enjoy John Green, but honestly, I still really love John Green. I'm not even going to like pretend that I don't like it as much. Looking for Alaska is definitely one of the like angsty and pretentious books, but I had such a good time reading it. And it's definitely a book that also has some fond memories for me because I read it in like a little book club thing that we had in our English class in grade 12, and one of my best friends was in that class as well. So we read Looking for Alaska together, and I remember having this little like mass market paperback copy, and it was all annotated and everything. I highlighted everything. I read it twice, and it was when I was really starting to figure out what interested me after being in school for so long and not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. That was the same point around when I read The Great Gatsby, because I felt like I finally knew the direction. I discovered that I really loved reading. I loved books, and I wanted to look further into books. So I became very interested in it and very nerdy, and that's why I kind of went through the whole book and just was annotating all the foreshadowing, all of those sorts of things, metaphors, all of that. And it was a really great book to do that with as well. But I just have such fond memories of that one that I do still think that it is a 5 out of 5 star book for me. I'm not sure if I would still feel the same way if I read it now, but I think that's a valid rating for when I first read it. Next is Enna Burning by Shannon Hale, and this is the second book in the Books of Bayern series, and this is actually my favorite of these books. So this is the second book, and The Goose Girl was the first book, and they're all based on obscure Grimm's fairy tales. And I did write a little review for this one, so I said this was so good. Much darker than The Goose Girl, but it worked really well. I love the character of Enna and seeing her struggle and be faced with so many obstacles. I was rooting for her the whole time. I loved The Goose Girl, but I loved this even more. So it definitely does take a little bit of a darker turn from the original book, but like I said, I did enjoy that. I thought it was a really impactful story and such an interesting dark twist on this obscure fairy tale. I don't remember exactly which one this one is referring to, but I liked seeing, because the Books of Bayern series is a series of like medieval fantastical companion novels, so you're following a different main character in in each of them, and I still think that Anna Burning was definitely my favorite. Next is The Luxe by Anna Godberson. This one I don't think would still be a 5 out of 5 star favorite for me, and that's kind of because I've entirely forgotten what this book is about. I remember my sister having this book when we were younger, and that's when I wasn't really into reading. So then when I got into reading and I was starting to like buy books mostly that were on bargain because I didn't have a lot of money and I was spending like just very little money on books. So I would look for ones that would show up on bargain sites, and The Luxe always showed up there. And because of that, I was like, oh, I recognize it. So then I picked it up and I read it. And it's kind of like Gossip Girl, but it's set in like society. I don't remember exactly the time period, but I remember like I liked it, but honestly, I could not tell you the specifics of it. Couldn't tell you any of the character names. So I feel like saying that this one is a 5 out of 5 star favorite for me might be a little bit of a stretch. Next, I have another Shannon Hale book actually, and that is Book of 1,000 Days. And this is the first Shannon Hale book that I read actually. And one of my least favorite books of all time is actually a Shannon Hale book, but I also, like, I've enjoyed so much by her, which I think is why I was so disappointed by that other one. But Book of 1,000 Days, I think is still a 5 out of 5 star read, and I did write a little review for this one as well. This was so heartwarming and delightful and powerful and just wow. I loved it so much. I can't wait to read more of Shannon Hale's stuff now and knowing how her writing style is. So yeah, it really was just such a fun medieval fantasy, and once again, this one, it's not part of the Books of Bayern series, but it is another obscure Grimm's fairy tale retelling, and I thought it was just really, really well done. Like, I do distinctly remember the characters and everything from this one, and I remember really loving those characters and just thoroughly enjoying the story. I read it when I was in a kind of slumpy mood, and it helped so much to get me out of that slump. Next is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, and I think this one does like withstand the test of time being a 5 out of 5 star read. It is such a good book. It's such a sweet story, and I think it's one that you can appreciate. It is technically a middle grade, but I think it's one that you can appreciate no matter how old you are. It was just, oh, it's so sweet. It's about a little boy who is raised by the ghosts in a graveyard, and the way that Neil Gaiman writes is fantastic, and this storyline just lends itself so well to his writing. It definitely is like a standout book from him. I have tried The Ocean at the End of the Lane, I know is also very popular by him, but I didn't really like that one. I think The Graveyard Book is the only book of his that I've really enjoyed. Next is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, and I would say that this does withstand the test of time being a 5 out of 5 star read for me. And when I originally read this, I was in grade 10, I believe, and I really, really loved it. Like in grade 10, I wasn't a big reader. What I would do is like sometimes I would read something and then I would go like a year without reading. So I'd read like one book a year. And I'm definitely very different than that now, obviously, but one of my friends had recommended City of Bones to me, and I remember reading that one, getting to the end, being so frustrated, and then reading the rest of the series as well. So there's definitely a lot of nostalgia connected to this story for me, and my sister and my mom also read this book. Like, it was just a whole thing where we all read it, and it makes it so I have a story connected with it, so I think it definitely is still 5 out of 5 stars, and it is just a really enjoyable book. I didn't particularly love the last 3 books that were added onto the series, but I think that the first book still would give it 5 out of 5 stars. Next is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I remember this was another book that I read when I was kind of first getting into reading, and I went to Walmart, and this was when I really didn't have a lot of money because I was in grade 11, I think, at this point, and I didn't have a job or anything. So I went to Walmart and I bought the box set of the Hunger Games series because the movie was coming out, and I read the books in 3 days, and that was very unheard of at the time for me. That this was kind of the first series that like I had really just completely binged, and I so thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, Catching Fire I think is still my favorite out of the series, and Mockingjay really didn't like that much, but the Hunger Games books like just absolutely blew me away. I think they were fantastic, and I think if I reread them now I would still really enjoy them. I think they are definitely really great dystopians, and I'm not a huge fan of Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, which came out last year, I think it was, that she decided to add on a prequel, but the original series does still stand. Other than Mockingjay, I wasn't a huge fan of that one, but whatever. Speaking of actually a series that would be like the first one that I ever read the entire thing of, we have Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. I remember I was in grade 6 when I read this one, and that's honestly, I know I keep saying this, but that's when I did not pick up books at all. And we went to, like, sometimes I would just go to the bookstore, and Chapters used to have this like buy 3 get the 4th free, and my sister really loved reading, so she would go, and then I would like all the pretty covers, so then I would pick up some books, and I picked up the Uglies series, and oh my gosh, I just like completely loved it. I still remember I think the first line is about like the sky being the color of cat vomit. I really should reread it to see if I would enjoy it as much, because I haven't read it since that very first time. But I remember after finishing that series, I just wanted to read absolutely everything from Scott Westerfeld, and Peeps I think was his other novel, and I read that one and I thought it was okay. I never like finished with the series, and I still have Leviathan by him that I haven't finished yet, but I really, really need to. I have read Afterworld since then by him, and that one I enjoyed, but I have so many fond memories of being in grade school and having that on my desk, and just like, it's kind of the first book that truly sucked me into the story and that I read without actually like having to. So Goodreads has stopped loading for me, so I think I'm actually going to leave it there. That was just kind of like a little start to my 5 out of 5 star reads, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you would like me to do another one of these, please let me know, because I can definitely do like more parts, because I have a lot of books that I have given 5 out of 5 stars that I should really talk about and kind of look back on and see if I still think that they are 5 out of 5 stars, or just talk about some books recently that really are 5 out of 5 stars, because I mean, I just read them. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in another new video soon. Bye!